On December 13th, 2024, a school photographer captured a moment that should have been a simple memory of a class trip. In that photo, the students of Salt Springs Elementary School are gathered together, but one face stands out for the wrong reasons. 4-year-old Jack Sullivan is looking directly into the camera lens, and he has a clearly visible black eye. That photo didn't just sit in a private album. It was posted publicly on the school's official Facebook page for the world to see. No one removed the image. No one asked the hard questions that needed to be asked. No one intervened. Exactly 4 months and 19 days later, Jack and his older sister Lilly would vanish without a trace from their rural home. But that black eye in the photograph was not the first one. And as we now know from the harrowing evidence emerging, it was not the only one. It was merely one of a long series of warning signs that the adults and the institutions responsible for protecting these children failed to act upon. This is a reality of what was happening inside the house on Gairloch Road. This is what the adults in Lilly and Jack's lives knew, or what they should have known. This is what child protection services were told, what teachers observed behind closed doors, and what a provincial social worker found when she finally walked through that front door. Now, nearly 9 months after 2 children disappeared into the wilderness of rural Nova Scotia, the questions are no longer just about the location of Lilly and Jack. The questions have shifted toward accountability. Who failed them? And how did the system break down so completely? The picture emerging piece by piece through unsealed court documents, investigative journalism, and recent criminal charges is a picture of a home that was falling apart long before the morning of May 2nd, 2025. It was a home where the red flags were waving high, where multiple adults saw the distress, and where, for reasons that remained shrouded in legal secrecy, nothing was done to save them. Here at the investigation room, we don't chase the easy headlines. We follow the hard evidence. We examine what was documented, what was reported, and most importantly, what was ignored. We search for the truth in the cases that the public refuses to let be forgotten. To understand the tragedy of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, we have to look back further than the day they went missing. We have to look at the environment that shaped their final months. They lived in a mobile home on Gairloch Road in Lansdowne Station, located in the rugged terrain of Pictou County, Nova Scotia. They lived there with their mother, Malia Brooks Murray, and their stepfather, Daniel Martel. The property was a shared family plot, also housing Martel's mother, Janie McKenzie, who lived in a separate structure before eventually moving into a camper in the driveway. Lansdowne Station is a tiny hamlet of approximately 100 people, tucked away in a notorious cellular dead zone. It is a place surrounded by endless spruce forests, steep banks, thick brush, and dangerous bogs. It is one of the most remote and sparsely populated areas in the province, roughly 140 kilometers northeast of Halifax. The home itself was described by investigative reporters as a cluttered, aging mobile home. There were holes in the floor of the front stoop. Tarps were used to protect the underside of the trailer from the harsh elements. Inside, a large wood stove dominated the living room. Despite the chaos, there were touches of normal childhood. The children's artwork was pasted to the kitchen wall, right next to the sliding patio door that led to the yard where they spent hours playing near a chicken coop. It was a loud and often chaotic environment. In fact, the step-grandmother eventually retreated to a camper in the driveway specifically because of the noise and the tension inside the main home. Malia Brooks Murray, 27, a member of the Sipek and Katic First Nation, stayed home with the children and the couple's baby daughter, Meadow. Daniel Martel, 34, worked at a local hardwood mill. The two had met on Facebook and moved in together after only 2 weeks of knowing each other. According to unsealed court documents, the relationship was troubled almost from the start. Brooks Murray would later tell police that Martel would physically block her, hold her down, and that he had once pushed her. She alleged that he would take her phone from her when she tried to call her mother for help. These allegations of domestic control provide the first layer of the dark atmosphere that defined the house on Gairloch Road. The allegations of domestic violence are only one part of the disturbing picture, because there were other systemic problems inside that home, problems that multiple adults outside the family were fully aware of. In hindsight, these issues should have triggered a much stronger response from the authorities. The first major issue was substance use. Daniel Martel eventually admitted to reporters from the Globe and Mail that he had used methamphetamines. He stated quite clearly that he had taken meth and, in his words, pretty much everything. This wasn't denial. It was a blunt admission of a serious drug history. However, Martel's narrative was inconsistent. In separate interviews, he insisted he had never actually struggled with drugs and did not have a problem. Yet at the same time, he claimed he was attending Narcotics Anonymous 3 times a week and taking a battery of online courses in anger management, depression, parenting, and violent behavior. He claimed these courses were recognized by child protection officials and that he was taking them specifically because he needed to clear his name for Child Protective Services, CPS. This phrase is haunting. It confirms that CPS was already actively involved in this family's life. It tells us that Martel knew he was under intense scrutiny for reasons serious enough that he felt the need to perform a complete overhaul of his image for the authorities. The second issue was the physical state of the children. Beyond the December 13 school photo, Jack Sullivan appeared to have a black eye in at least 2 other separate photographs taken in the months before he vanished. When asked about these injuries, Martel's explanation was that they were accidental or caused by the children themselves. He told the media that most of the black eyes were probably from Lilly or because Jack was really clumsy. When investigators or journalists pointed specifically to the school photo, the one where the injury was documented by a third party, Martel often went silent. The third issue is the direct involvement of the state. A provincial child protection social worker had actually visited the Sullivan home to investigate a report of suspected abuse or neglect. This report didn't come from a random tip. It came from the school. Teachers had raised the alarm. When asked about this visit, Martel tried to downplay it, claiming it was merely about the children's learning disabilities and not their physical safety. He described it as an offer of support for Jack's aggressive behavior and Lily's tendency to pull out her own hair in frustration. But in Nova Scotia, referrals to child welfare are made when there is a suspected case of neglect or abuse. That is the legal standard. Something the school saw was serious enough to trigger the system. What that social worker found and why the children remain in the home remains one of the most protected secrets in this case. Belinda Gray, the children's paternal grandmother, has been a tireless voice in the wilderness, asking what exactly CPS was doing. She has publicly questioned why the system didn't have answers or take more decisive action given the documented chaos. Layered on top of the drug use and the injuries was a crushing financial situation. The children's biological father, Cody Sullivan, had stopped paying child support after losing his job 9 months prior to the disappearance. The couple had been fighting about money constantly. Financial stress, methamphetamine use, allegations of domestic violence, and a series of unexplained injuries to a 4-year-old boy. All of this was a powder keg inside the house on Gairloch Road. Now, we must look at the final 72 hours before the children vanished. The details here are critical. The last day Lily and Jack attended school was April 29th, 2025. On April 30th, school was closed for a professional development day. On May 1st, they were kept home because Lily allegedly had a cough. On May 2nd, they were absent again. For 3 consecutive days, no teacher, no administrator, and no outside adult laid eyes on these children. The only people who claimed to have seen them alive during this window were the 2 adults in the home. On the afternoon of May 1st, security footage from a Dollarama in New Glasgow captured the family together. This is the last independent confirmation that Lily and Jack were alive. After that, we only have the word of Malia Brooks Murray and Daniel Martel. Brooks Murray told police she put the children to bed that night, but her story shifted. First say it was 9 p.m., then later changing it to 10 p.m. She claimed she slept through the night and heard nothing. Martel claimed he also went to bed early and slept until dawn. But as the sun began to rise on May 2nd, the story of what happened during those dark overnight hours would soon be challenged by the people living just a few hundred meters away. While the 2 adults inside the mobile home on Gairloch Road claimed to be sound asleep, the silence of the rural Nova Scotia woods was reportedly broken by the sound of an engine. This is where the narrative provided by the parents begins to clash violently with the accounts of those living nearby. 2 neighbors, living within earshot of the property, came forward with information that suggested the house was far from quiet during the early morning hours of May 2nd. Brad Wong, who lives just 300 meters away on an elevated forested hill, told investigators a story that directly contradicts Daniel Martel's version of events. From his vantage point, Wong could see vehicle lights flickering over the treetops at the Sullivan property. He reported hearing a loud vehicle coming and going from the area not once, but 3 or 4 times between midnight and the first light of dawn. Wong was so certain of what he heard that he agreed to be identified by the Globe and Mail, stating that he felt compelled to speak up because Martel's claim of being home all evening was simply inconsistent with what he had witnessed. He wasn't the only one. A second neighbor, Justin Smith, was also awake in the early hours of May 2nd. Around 1:30 a.m., he heard a car on Highway 289 performing a turnaround by the railroad tracks near the intersection of Gairloch Road. He described the vehicle making a significant amount of noise, going quiet for about 2 minutes, and then heading back toward the Sullivan residence. These 2 independent witnesses provided a timeline of movement that suggests a vehicle was active during the very window when the children supposedly vanished while the world was asleep. However, this is where the investigation hits a wall of digital contradiction. The RCMP later stated that a thorough review of local surveillance footage found no evidence of any vehicles moving at that time. An official spokesperson confirmed that the footage did not corroborate the neighbors' accounts. Martel himself dismissed the claims as complete nonsense, insisting the family's SUV never left the yard and wasn't even a loud vehicle to begin with. This creates a haunting mystery within the mystery. 2 neighbors who swear they heard the movement of a vehicle, and a surveillance record that remains silent. What happened in those hours between midnight and dawn? Did someone leave the property? Or is there another explanation for the sounds heard in the dead zone of Lansdowne Station? As the sun rose on May 2nd, the timeline becomes even tighter. At 6:15 a.m., Malia Brooks Murray called the school to mark Lilly and Jack absent for a 3rd day. According to the parents' own account, at the moment that call was made, the children were still physically inside the home. Brooks Murray was marking them absent for a day they were supposedly still present for. Between 8 a.m. and 9:40 a.m., both parents claimed they remained in their bedroom with baby Meadow. This is a detail that investigators have scrutinized heavily. Jack Sullivan was not seen by any adult that entire morning. While both parents told police they heard him playing in the kitchen, neither of them actually laid eyes on him. Lilly was the only one who physically entered the bedroom. Jack was merely a voice, a sound of play, a presence behind a door. Then there's the testimony of Martel's mother, Janie McKenzie. She told police she fell asleep around 8:50 a.m. and was later woken by her dog barking. She claimed that during this period, she heard Jack and Lilly laughing and playing on the swings in the backyard. If her memory is accurate, the children were alive and playing outside just before 9 a.m. Yet, within the hour, the atmosphere would shift from play to panic. At some point before 10 a.m., the parents claimed they discovered the children were gone. The back sliding patio door was standing wide open. At 10:01 a.m., the 911 call was placed. In that short window, 2 young children, 1 4, 1 6, supposedly dressed themselves, put on their boots, and walked out of the yard without a single adult noticing. Jack's blue dinosaur boots were gone. Lily's pink rubber boots and her strawberry backpack were gone. They had their things, and they vanished into one of the most unforgiving landscapes in the province. But even as the search began, another digital red flag appeared. Investigators discovered that Brooks Murray had deleted an application called Text Plus from her phone shortly after the disappearance. In a cellular dead zone where standard service is non-existent, an internet-based calling app like Text Plus would have been the primary lifeline for communication. When the app was deleted, the call records were erased. Brooks Murray told police she simply didn't need it anymore, but the timing complicated the authorities' ability to verify who she spoke to during those first critical hours. Every detail, from the bedroom doors to the deleted apps, forms a picture that investigators have been trying to solve for 9 months. A picture where the pieces don't quite fit. The disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan triggered one of the most intensive search and rescue operations in the history of rural Nova Scotia. Over 160 volunteers joined professional teams to comb through 8.5 square kilometers of dense forest, bogs, and thick brush. They used everything at their disposal: drones, helicopters, and specialized K-9 units. The community rallied, and the nation watched with bated breath, hoping for a miracle in the woods. Yet, despite the massive scale of the effort, the physical evidence found was hauntingly slim. On the afternoon of May 2nd, family members found a pink blanket snagged in a tree about a kilometer from home. Both parents confirmed it belonged to Lilly. Later, a second piece of that same blanket was found in a garbage bag in a bin at the end of the family driveway. The explanation given was that Martel had ripped a piece off to block a draft in the house. But when the sniffer dogs were brought to the tree where the blanket was found, they picked up no scent of either child. It was as if the blanket had arrived there without the girl it belonged to. Boot prints were found in the woods, but they were never publicly linked to the children. By May 7th, the search was scaled back. The forest had given up almost nothing, and as the physical search cooled, the family unit itself fractured with startling speed. Within 24 hours of reporting the children missing, Malia Brooks Murray and Daniel Martel separated. She left him, took the baby, and moved in with her mother, blocking him on social media and cutting off all contact. On May 9th, during her 5th interview with the police, Brooks Murray finally broke her silence on the nature of their relationship. She disclosed that Martel had been physically abusive, confirming the patterns of control that neighbors and acquaintances had suspected. She described being held down, blocked from leaving, and having her phone confiscated. These disclosures shifted the investigation's tone. On May 12th, both parents underwent polygraph examinations, and surprisingly, an investigator noted that both were found to be truthful. However, the public must understand the limitations of a polygraph. We do not know what questions were asked. We do not know if the questions were so narrow that a truthful answer could still hide a broader reality. A polygraph is not a verdict. It is a measure of a physiological response to specific, redacted words. For 9 months, the case sat in a state of agonizing limbo. The RCMP maintained that there were no reasonable grounds to believe a crime had been committed, treating it as a missing persons case under Provincial Act. Daniel Martel remained the public face of the tragedy, giving frequent interviews and positioning himself as a figurehead for the search. He submitted DNA, volunteered for tests, and insisted he was being framed by a narrative designed to make him look evil. But in December 2025, the tone of the authorities changed. Staff Sergeant Rob McCammon revealed that police were making headway and that Martel himself no longer believed the children had simply wandered into the woods. If the children didn't wander off, and if no crime was committed, the logic of the case began to collapse under its own weight. Then came January 2026. During a media interview on the 15th, Martel began to speak about himself in the third person, a psychological shift that many found unsettling. 11 days later, on January 26, the man who spent 9 months claiming he had nothing to hide was arrested. He was in charge of the disappearance of the children. The RCMP was very careful to state that, but he was charged with assault, sexual assault, and forcible confinement involving an adult victim. These alleged crimes took place between September 2024 and March 2025. This is a 7-month period that overlaps almost entirely with the time Lilly and Jack were living in that home. The charge of forcible confinement is particularly heavy. It implies the unlawful restraint of another person's freedom, suggesting a pattern of sustained control rather than a single outburst. It paints a picture of a household where someone was being held against their will while 2 young children watched and lived in the shadows of that violence. While Martel is presumed innocent and the charges remain untested in court, the timeline is now a matter of public record. It reveals that while the system was visiting the home and while the school was seeing black eyes, there was an environment of alleged predatory violence occurring under the same roof. The question of whether the system failed Lilly and Jack is no longer a matter of speculation. It is the central theme of a national tragedy. The environment was a toxic mix of methamphetamine use, financial desperation, and alleged domestic imprisonment. In such an environment, children aren't just witnesses. They are victims of collapse of safety. With the arrest of Daniel Martel on charges of assault and forcible confinement, the focus of this investigation must pivot from the actions of the individuals to the actions or inactions of the system itself. We are forced to examine what the state did and what it failed to do during the critical months leading up to May 2nd, 2025. In Nova Scotia, the Department of Community Services is tasked with the ultimate protection of children, but in the case of Lilly and Jack, that protection appears to have been a series of missed opportunities and documented red flags that led nowhere. The school, Salt Springs Elementary, performed its duty as a mandated reporter. Teachers, trained to spot the subtle signs of trauma and the overt signs of physical injury, saw something that compelled them to pick up the phone. They saw the black eyes. They saw the behavioral shifts. They saw the children's distress. They triggered the referral to Child Protective Services. This is exactly how the system is designed to function. A report is made, a file is opened, and a professional social worker is dispatched to the home to assess the environment. We know this visit happened. We know a social worker walked across the threshold of the mobile home on Gairloch Road. But what happened next is where the trail goes cold, hidden behind a thick veil of provincial privacy laws. Daniel Martel's version of that visit was that it was benign and offered support for learning disabilities and behavioral issues. He framed it as a routine check-in. But the legal reality in Nova Scotia is different. CPS does not usually open investigations into learning disabilities. They open investigations into safety. If the referral came from the school due to suspected abuse, then the assessment should have looked at the black eyes, the reported drug use, and the atmosphere of domestic control. Scott Armstrong, the minister responsible for child protection, has stated publicly that he reviewed the children's file and that the situation weighs heavily on the province. But weighing heavily is not accountability. No details have been shared regarding why the children were left in an environment where the stepfather was reportedly using methamphetamines and the mother was allegedly being physically restrained. Belinda Gray, the children's paternal grandmother, has become the conscience of this case, demanding a full public inquiry. She is asking the questions the government seems desperate to avoid. What did the social worker see? Did they look at the children's bodies for more than just a cursory glance? Did they interview the children away from the influence of Martel? Was there a follow-up plan? And if so, who was responsible for ensuring it was followed? The failure is not just found in the CPS office. It is found in the gaps between agencies. If the school saw injuries and CPS visited but nothing changed, who was the final line of defense? Research into intimate partner violence tells us that children in these homes are at an exponentially higher risk of harm. When a caregiver is being controlled and isolated, the children are essentially trapped in a fortress of dysfunction. The presence of methamphetamines adds a layer of unpredictable volatility that should have made the home a high-priority case for immediate intervention. Yet, the children remained. They remained until they were kept home for 3 days, hidden from the eyes of the only people, their teachers, who were actively trying to protect them. As we look at the timeline, we see a pattern of invisible days. April 30th, May 1st, and May 2nd. For 72 hours, the system was effectively blind. No one checked on them when they didn't show up for school for the third day in a row. No one followed up on the previous CPS visit to see if the behavioral support was actually working. The tragedy of Lilly and Jack is not just that they vanished. It is that they were allowed to exist in a state of high-risk vulnerability for months, while the adults in the system watched and took notes. The public has a right to know if the criteria for removing children in rural Nova Scotia is too high, or if the resources for social workers are so thin that children like Lilly and Jack are simply falling to the cracks of a broken floor. Until the documents are unsealed and a public inquiry is launched, the veil of secrecy serves only to protect the reputation of the institutions, not the lives of the children they were sworn to safeguard. As we reach the 9th month of the search for Lilly and Jack Sullivan, 3 primary theories continue to dominate the investigation, each weighted by the new evidence of what was truly happening inside the Gairloch Road home. The first theory, that the children were harmed by someone within the family, has gained significant traction following the arrest of Daniel Martel. Supporters of this theory point to the domestic violence allegations, the history of unexplained injuries, and a convenient 72-hour window where the children were kept out of public view. They point to the fact that the couple separated almost immediately, a move often seen in cases where the pressure of shared secret becomes unbearable. They also highlight the neighbors' reports of a vehicle moving in the dead of night, suggesting that if something happened in the house, there was ample time and opportunity to move the evidence into the vast, unforgiving spruce forest that surround the property. The second theory, the possibility of an outside abduction, rests almost entirely on the testimony of a single witness, Natasha Haywood. She reported seeing two children matching Lilly and Jack's general description walking toward a woman near a gold sedan. While specific, this lead has never been corroborated by physical evidence or other witnesses. In a cellular dead zone with limited traffic, a strange vehicle and an unknown woman should have left some other trace, yet the RCMP has not identified any suspects or vehicles matching that description. Critics of this theory argue it is a red herring, a narrative that fits the parents' initial claim that the children simply wandered off and were taken. The third theory, the initial claim that the children wandered into the woods and got lost, is now considered the least likely by almost everyone involved, including Daniel Martel himself. The massive ground search, the use of cadaver dogs 5 months later, and the total lack of any scent trail suggests that the children never walked into those woods on their own. Children who wander usually leave something behind, a footprint, a scrap of clothing, a scent for a trained K9. In this case, there was nothing but a single pink blanket found in a tree, an item that investigators found suspicious given the lack of accompanying scent. If the children didn't wander off, then the only remaining options are that they were taken or they were moved. Today, the investigation into the disappearance of Lilly and Jack remains classified as a missing person case, but the language used by the Crown and the RCMP has shifted toward the possibility of criminality. Staff Sergeant Rob McCammon has expressed confidence that the case will be resolved, citing technology-based investigative techniques. This likely refers to the forensic analysis of cell tower data. Even in a dead zone, pings can sometimes be recovered, and the digital footprint of deleted applications like TextPlus. They are looking for the truth in the data because the people in the home have given them shifting timelines and inconsistent denials. On March 2nd, 2026, Daniel Martel will appear in Pictou Provincial Court to answer for the charges of assault and sexual assault. While these charges are not legally linked to the children's disappearance, they are inextricably linked to the character of the environment Lilly and Jack called home. That court appearance will be a pivotal moment for the community. It represents the first time the figurehead of the search must stand before a judge and face the allegations of violence that defined his household. For the family of the children, specifically their grandmother Belinda Gray, it is a small step toward a much larger justice. Lilly Sullivan was 6 years old. She loved girly things and followed her brother everywhere. Jack was 4. He was shy and loved dinosaurs. They were not just files or cases for the media to dissect. They were children with artwork on the walls and boots by the door. They were children who were failed by almost every adult who was supposed to keep them safe, from the people in their home to the social workers who visited them. Someone knows what happened in those early morning hours on May 2nd. Someone knows why the patio door was open and why the engine was running in the dark. We conclude this investigation with a call for the truth. After 9 months, the silence of the Nova Scotia woods is no longer acceptable. The reward of $150,000 remains unclaimed, but the real price is the loss of 2 innocent lives. If you have any information, no matter how small, about the house on Gairloch Road or the event of May 2025, now is the time to speak. Lilly and Jack Sullivan deserve to be found. They deserve to be brought home, and the system that failed them must finally be held to account. Thank you for following this case with the gravity it deserves. The search for Lilly and Jack is not over. It is only entering a new, more difficult chapter.